rock and roll to me is supposed to be dangerous and larger than life, and there was an element of that, minus the metally bullshit of, you know, of what came before. But, you know, Al lived the real, he walked the walk, you know, and he was always the last one standing, and he was the one that, you know, there was no posing involved, and when you met him, you weren't disappointed, you know. So I went to this session in Chicago Tracks, and during the session, I ended up running into Al somewhere, and he invited me to come hang out with him in the studio, and that was like, you know, I can't believe it, you know. I'm hanging out with Al at Chicago Tracks, and he was working on 1,000 Homo DJs at the time. It was you know, it's in the short list of cool memories of, you know, being around somebody that you've respected and being treated with respect. And I remember he was working on Supernaut, and he goes, "Hey, you want to try singing this?" And I'm like, "Fuck yeah, I want to try singing this," you know. And I remember that like it was yesterday. I would say it's not until, you know, in the last few years that I felt comfortable being with myself, you know. And I don't mean that from an ego way, but from a very shy, introverted, not comfortable being around other people, and then being thrust into, okay, now you're in a room with these guys, and I feel like I'm the guy that's got to prove something, and probably the least qualified to be in the room, and, you know. Yeah, but it was certainly intimidating at the time, you know, because I also felt like, here's this 9 Inch Nails, some pussy pop band, you know, wannabe, around the guys that really felt like they were credible to me at the time, and it was very flattering to be acknowledged in that level by those guys, you know, and I didn't take that lightly. You know, it meant a lot to me.
Yeah, in 1996, I was on tour with.
My dream was to be, you know, like Al. I mean, he was the most creative guy out there at the time, and it seemed like he didn't give a shit when anyone thought about it. And, you know, I mean, now he's on a big label. Great, I'm going to make the weirdest, hardest, most inaccessible record. It's a cool thing to be inspired by. You know, it felt like that was the thing that was really important to me in my way life turned out. It felt like music that spoke to me, and it was aggressive, and it didn't feel retro. It didn't feel like it was modeled after some 70s archetype of what a rock band should be, or something based on the Beatles or Black Sabbath or something like that. But it was using technology and things that didn't exist prior to that in a way that was abusing them, and it felt like there were no rules, and it felt like, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say I haven't been inspired by that and been borrowed probably more than I should have at times, you know, but it really was from a position of respect, and I mean, those guys were, you see a band that was so good, you know, and I'm in a band that it pisses you off that it's that good, but it's good to get your ass kicked like that, because the bar's, okay, that's the new thing to, you know, beat, rather than constantly wondering, how do people like this shit? And, you know, I got a good ass kicking from Al a number of times on a creative level. What I kind of imagined was happening was finally some commercial success was rewarded, you know, in a kind of I don't mean to say formula in a bad way, but something was stumbled upon that had a market and an audience. There's a juggling act that goes on of, do I want to give them what they want, you know, which I made, and I guess I could, or do I have to follow this thing that's going to bum everybody out? Probably, you know, but might be greater in the long run. But, you know, a night that wasn't ended by the sun coming up on tour was a wasted night. You know, it's not going to last forever. And by the time the Downward Spiral tour, 94, 95, 96-ish, in that era, you know, I was well on my way to full-fledged alcoholism, drug addiction, you know, my own life. And I was starting to see hey, maybe this isn't all it's cracked up to be, and I'm genuinely miserable, through and through. I'm depressed and I hate myself, and for me, it got to a point where I I didn't want to be that guy anymore, and I didn't know if that was going to cost me. No, I should say at the same time, we're at the peak of popularity, and I'm reading about myself as though I'm someone else, and now I feel like I have to live up to this vampire-y kind of whatever I've become to people,
Back.
I'm abusing whatever talent I had, and I can't think straight, and I can't make good music, and well, it seems to have something to do with this trail of cocaine residue and liquor bottles that are leading to my passed out body on the floor, Wow, I'm getting all these nice things and rewarded and congratulated and praised, rewarded through money and everything else for doing this thing. Okay, now it's time to do a new thing. And there's a juggling act that goes on of, do I want to give them what they want, which I made, and I guess I could, or do I have to follow this thing that's going to bum everybody out? Probably, but might be greater in the long run, but, it's, again, I'd like to say those things never enter into your mind, and when you write, you go in a room, a lead room that keeps out all, external stimulant, but that's not the way it works for me. You're aware that, if I put a record out that there's not any chance any song could ever be hummed or remembered or put on a radio or whatever, then I can't be disappointed when, oh wow, it didn't go that way because it doesn't have those things in it, But when I was around Al, early 90s, it was impressive, the kind of legacy and the level of, not PC, not no flannel fucking shirt and save the earth. It was like finally getting the courage and just beating my head against the wall enough to realize that I'm either going to die or I've got to get my shit together. Took me a while, but I chose to get my shit together at the risk of losing what might have been good. Maybe I need that, the romantic notion of I need to be high to be inspired or whatever it might be, But it was more important to me, even if I lost all that, just to be alive and try to redeem myself in my own eyes. And, as I found that, it's honestly more fun for me now. It's certainly more fun and rewarding to be present and feel like I'm doing some of the best stuff I've done. I'm not reliant on anything else, and I remember it.
I quit drinking, but I've discovered caffeine, and I just keep drinking coffee, and it's just fucking great.